We need to adopt the high-paid consultant mindset or the doctor's mindset or the lawyer's mindset. If you walk into a doctor's office, the doctor doesn't say, "Thank you so much for choosing me. I'm so grateful for your custom. I think it would be a great opportunity if we get to know each other, and can I take you for lunch?" He says, "What seems to be the problem? Drop your pants, bend over."
Yes.
And we respect the authority and we go to him. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling Mars bars or nuclear submarines.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast, where we delve into the stories of successful entrepreneurs so you can discover what's possible. Today's guest is Matthew Kimberley.
Hello, this is Yaro, and welcome to an Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. Today I have a guest who I recently connected with at a conference in London, and we're going to continue the London theme with the accents here. And it was a Chris Ducker event, and my guest was speaking on the topic of sales, which was, in fact, a fantastic presentation on sales. We have to talk a bit about that. I'd love to dive into how to sell an apple. That was what my guest topic was. But it wasn't just about selling. There was a lot of personal exploration of different aspects of his life. And I found it so interesting, but I was also curious to learn more. So that's why I had to invite Matthew Kimberley onto the podcast to find out more about this Secret Service background that he has lived. So Matthew, hello.
Thanks for having me, Yaro. Huge pleasure to be here. And I've been following you online for years and years and years. Probably, you were one of the first names that I started to recognize when I discovered that there was a world that didn't require desks out there.
Which actually makes me curious what world you were in then, if it wasn't the online world. So, if you don't mind, I'd love to. First of all, let's just briefly summarize, because I was asking you this before the podcast, because I don't really know much about your background, besides the fact that you speak and travel a lot and teach the world how to sell stuff, and you're very good at that. But you've obviously lived a life before that, and I'd love to know more about that. But in summary, why should we care about your skills, Matthew?
Well, I think they're important skills, and whether you choose to learn from me or somebody else, and my colleagues and competitors, which is a nasty word, but colleagues are equally, if not more competent to teach you. But I think learning how to sell is the most important skill that any person, whether they're in sales or not, can learn. Both from a revenue generation point, but also from an independence point of view. I think when you can sell, you don't need any other skills. You don't need to be able to make things. You don't need to be able to build things. You don't even need access to funds necessarily. You buy a widget on credit, you sell it for more than you paid for it, and you're set. So I think whether you're using selling to negotiate a pay raise, or to negotiate with your kids, or to get a date, or to get a better lease on your apartment, or to make bank, I think it's probably one of the most independence granting and enhancing skills that any of us should learn. And I've been a student of it for 20 years now, at least.
Wow, so 20 years. So in terms of businesses you've run, have they all been related to sales? Or I know you've written a book about sales.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. So the first time I really got into selling was when I was a kid. And I know a lot of people have the apple cart or car washing story, door-to-door, neighborhood, football card trading stories. Mine was slightly different. I was a street performer, and I realized that my dad wasn't overly keen on giving me an allowance. We came from a very modest background. My dad was a priest, and they get a free house, but not much cash. And so I was interested in what money could do for me in terms of being able to jump on trains and go and visit friends and stuff like that. And I realized that I had this skill which people would pay for, which was juggling. And so I started juggling in the street. And a couple of lessons I learned there were that if you ask for money, you can double your income. Instead of just leaving your hat on the floor, you say, "Hey, if you've enjoyed the show, would you like to make a small donation?" And people would. So that was my first foray. I then fibbed about my age to get a job in a call center, which was fairly miserable, but taught me some skills around discipline and things like that. And then through various forays into bar work, which I adored, I ended up in a timeshare company in Malta in the Mediterranean, selling very expensive holiday ownership packages to tourists who had no intention of waking up in the morning and buying holiday ownership packages. And that was my first introduction to the psychology of selling. So we'd walk people in through the door. Very often they didn't know exactly what they were coming in for. We called them UPs, or unqualified prospects. And our duty was to educate them, inform them, get to know them, build rapport with them, present them with an opportunity. And roughly 12% of the time, across the board, year in, year out, people would make a sizable investment. And that was fascinating to me, that if you stuck to the numbers and you stuck to the script and you stuck to the presentation, then you could earn a living from doing that. But I only stayed doing it for a year because it wasn't the kind of product I'd be interested in selling a family member. So there was some integrity issues there. But word got around that I was good at selling, and a guy in Brussels called me up and said, would you like to come and work in my recruitment company? So I got into corporate sales, which was interesting and, again, discipline based. There was a direct correlation between the number of telephone calls and telephone calls I made and meetings I attended, and the amount of money that could be earned for the company at the end of the month. And of course, the company earned a lot more money than me, so I decided I wanted to start my own recruitment company, which I did. I started a recruitment company, and we did very well. We had some very impressive gross revenue figures, seven figures in the first year, double that in the second year. And unfortunately, it wasn't quite right for me, it appeared. My relationship with my business partner was fractious, and I wasn't a comfortable manager, and I didn't have the skills needed to run an office as well as sell. So I walked away at the end of year 3, divested myself of my 50% of the business, and decided that I wanted to teach other people how to sell. I'd been attending breakfast networking meetings in my role as business owner, and met a ton of coaches, business coaches, management consultants, life coaches, and some of them were piss poor, Yaro, but still earning a living. And I thought, well, if I can monetize my knowledge and my abilities, I always loved training up my sales staff. I loved that, and I loved selling the thing. I thought if I combine the two, then there might be a living for me. So I didn't want to hit the market cold. I didn't want to wing it, didn't want to make it up. So I bought a license to teach the Book Yourself Solid system off a guy called Michael Port, who wrote the book Yourself Solid, and now runs Heroic Public Speaking. And he had a school of coach training called the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training. So I took it very seriously and ran with it, really impressed Michael to the point where I became the head of the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training. He became my business partner, and I ended up running Book Yourself Solid worldwide for 6 or 7 years. So training other coaches do what I do, meanwhile simultaneously speaking and teaching and working with my own clients. And that led me to where I am today. So we set up Heroic Public Speaking, which is a public speaking training company. And about 18 months ago, maybe a bit longer, 2 years ago, I said, Michael, it's been an absolute ride. I feel my apprenticeship here has finished. And he said, don't go. And I said, no, I must. And it was a teary farewell, and we remain on excellent terms. He's my youngest son's godfather. And I still do some consulting work for him on marketing for his various companies. And now I, as you said, I travel the world. I teach people how to sell. I work almost exclusively with business owners of micro businesses. So people who have got their chops and they're perhaps doing 150 to 200K a year on their own or with a partner and looking to grow from that.
Well, you've given me the whole story in 8 minutes there, Matthew, so I think we can end the interview now.
I realized I'm talking for a long time. My alarm was going off saying, shut up, Kimberley, shut up.
No, that's fine. I didn't want to stop you, but normally I kind of interject with the storytelling a little bit there with the life story, because I love to pick apart that, but I'm still going to do that. And I would also like to spend a bit of time talking about how to sell, because I know there'll be people listening into this who are wondering, what are some of the basics of at least, getting better at selling, certainly since they're all online marketers listening to this. But before we do that, I'd love to ask you a few more questions about that growing up story of yours, because there's a few things that grab me. You said, first of all, you left to go to Malta. Were you, and was that when you were 18? I was going by some of your biographical information. So you left quite young from the UK, is that right?
Sure. So I'm 37 today. When I was 18, I left the UK and I went to Malaysia and worked in a private school over there, which actually was probably the first time I realized that it's miserable to not have money when everybody around you does. So I was teaching French and English to some of the wealthiest kids in Southeast Asia who were categorically disinterested in learning French. But at the weekends, they'd jump into their Ferraris and Lamborghinis and go hit the nightclubs of Kuala Lumpur. And I would be having noodles and getting on the bus if I was lucky. So after that, I wanted to go back to Italy Italy. So I went to Italy and I worked in a theatre troupe for probably 6 to 9 months or thereabouts, touring, teaching English through the medium of theatre. And then about the age of 19, went to Brussels, did some bar work, met a girl, a Maltese girl, and that's how I ended up in Malta at around 22 years old.
Okay. So when you were growing up in the UK, I'm guessing by the different choices you've made here in the juggling career and so forth, you didn't see yourself following that. I'm going to graduate from high school and I'm going to, enroll in a marketing degree at university or an economics degree or an engineering degree, get a normal corporate job. Did that ever cross your mind? Like, did you have a vision for your future back then?
I knew that I tried to leave high school when I was 16, and my parents, who'd always been very supportive of all of my choices, they didn't that's the maximum legal age that's the earliest you can leave school, full-time education in the UK. And I tried to leave, and I remember sitting at home for a week. I said I was going to travel the world and work in bars. I think I was just desperate. I had itchy feet and I was desperate to leave and desperate to move. And they managed to talk me out. My teachers got involved and they said, look, you're a bright kid. You should do your A-levels, otherwise you're screwed. And I said, well, if I'm going to commit to it, I'm going to commit fully. So I had a fantastic time at high school, age 17 and 18, studied languages and literature and did a ton of theatre. Knew I wasn't going back into education at 18. I didn't want to do it. I got great grades and traveled, went to Malaysia, ended up in an educational institution, funnily enough, but it was in an exotic location. And I applied for university and asked for a stay. You can have gap years in the UK, very common, and postponing enrollment is also very common. So I applied to a ton of universities, got accepted at all of them except the only one that interviewed me. So I applied to 6 universities. Cambridge interviewed me, said no, and all the other 5 who didn't interview me offered me a place. And so I accepted a place at the University of London to do a degree in French and Italian, and asked them again for a postponement. And then went to Brussels and started to taste freedom, and I asked for another postponement, and they said, you're not really serious, are you? I said, no, I don't think so. But it took me a few more years then. So I was applying for jobs in Brussels, and in Brussels, which is the center of the European Union administratively and legally, there's a ton of super educated people there with kind of 3 master's degrees, all applying for the same jobs. And I was getting rebuffed every time I saw an interesting job. They said, but you don't have a degree. And I said, well, this is, something's got to change. So I did eventually enroll through necessity, I'd say, through keeping my options open at the London School of Economics, who have a distance learning program. And I did a 3-year degree in politics and international relations by correspondence, which I was very glad to get. I haven't used it since, but I was very glad to get, had the options open to me at that stage. But no, I think it was always quite clear that, at least to my parents, they'd tell you that they were trailblazing is a horrible word, but you know what I mean. I wasn't keen to do it the same way as everybody else was doing it. And to this day, I stand by those decisions.
Did you end up getting work in Belgium?
Yeah, I did. Well, the recruitment company, first of all, but also I did a job at the European institutions for a little while. It was before my degree was granted, so I got a lifetime contract, which I actually still have. I'm on year 15, I think, of unpaid leave. The enrollment process takes about the interview process takes about 2 years, but I got recruited to do a low-level administrative job at the European institutions, and it sucked my will to live. And when I'd finished the probation period, 9 months in, they said, what do you want to do? Now you can do anything. I said, how much unpaid leave can I have? They said, pretty much as you like. I said, well, see ya, I'm off. I went straight back to selling recruitment services.
Wow. So you still have like a plan B there if you ever need it, huh?
Yeah, I figure that if, God forbid I should ever be in some kind of horrible accident and I lose my physical and mental capacities, then I can still go and shuffle paper at the European Commission.
So where does, and forgive me if you can't talk about this, but where does the British Official Secrets Act come into this story?
Right. So this is on my Amazon bio, and I'd actually forgotten about it since you mentioned it to me, Yaro. So when I was in year 2 of my recruitment company ownership, I realized that I was quite unhappy. It was making me unwell. I had staff who looked up to me and I think I respected, but I wasn't really respecting myself. I was working 15, 16 hours a day, including the weekends, and it was it was taking its toll on me. Like I said, not a very good relationship with my business partner. And I started to journal or write as an outlet. And I wrote a blog. It was called How to Get a Grip. And it was basically advice that I needed to hear to myself. It included, lots of swear words, drill sergeant style, get out of bed, stop feeling sorry for yourself, don't be wet. And I got a publishing contract off the back of it, just out of the blue. So it went viral. I think it was, I can't remember which website featured it, but I was getting kind of 50,000 views a day at one point and wasn't monetized. But a publisher did say, listen, we think we could turn this into a book. And I said, that would be great. So a book was published called How to Get a Grip, which is a personal development book. And it sold really well in the UK and continues to. It was very British, though, never really made it overseas, including the US. But that was where I wrote my Amazon bio kind of 6 years ago and said the most interesting thing that's happened to me can't be spoken about on account of the British Official Secrets Act. So I still can't talk about it, but there was a recruitment process which was in central London for a government organisation in England which looks after the UK's interests abroad. And I went through various steps in the recruitment process and was ultimately disqualified because I wasn't entirely truthful in my application. And I said, well, I thought this would be an asset for a spy. I got this far, right? And they said, well, yeah, we understand, but we've got your number now. Thanks very much, Kimberley. And that was it. That was the end of the story. But it was fascinating. It was a fascinating process. And the not entirely truthful in my application was the bit where you had to have lived in the UK for the majority of the previous 10 years. Oh. And I hadn't. I'd been abroad, but I told them, look, I've been working for the European institutions, and they, multiple people told me that's fine. The background checking guy said that's fine. We can go to Brussels and interview your friends there to do your background checks. But then the final step, apparently the Uber recruiter disagreed with the previous assessments. So unfortunately, I was disqualified, which is a good thing as well, because, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you today, I suspect.
Well, yeah, not in this capacity anyway.
Yeah, right. We've been meeting at a bar in the Ukraine and exchanging envelopes inside newspapers.
Right. And this is also kind of funny. In your Amazon profile, right next to the line where you do talk about that you can't speak about something in your history because of the British Official Secrets Act, right next to that is a black and white photograph of you looking pretty grim on, I think, a Harley Davidson with a big floppy hat. And it does look like you're kind of like an undercover spy, but, maybe in the punk era or something. So can you, and if you want to check this out, just go check out Matthew Kimberley's bio on Amazon.com. But I just thought it's a wonderful combination of elements you've got on this page.
So the more I talk about my background, I think I've probably got suffering from some kind of entrepreneurial ADD or similar, because another thing that I did before I ended up working in timeshare in Malta was I decided I wanted to be a graphic designer because I was competent with Photoshop. So what you actually see there is a photo of my face superimposed onto either James Dean or Marlon Brando's publicity image. So it was a pretty good job. It fooled you, right? But, it wasn't me. And I do use that image from time to time to demonstrate. In my keynote, for example, if I talk about my timeshare years, that's how we felt. We felt like we were kings of the world. Our training videos were Boiler Room and Glengarry Glen Ross, and Monday nights, which were our nights off, we were encouraged to go to strip clubs and take drugs and live large and basically develop expensive habits so that we'd be dependent upon our expensive paychecks.
Wow.
That came in every month. Yeah. It was a horribly unhealthy environment.
Okay. so many places to go here, Matthew. You've quite a diverse background. Can we talk?
This is already the most interesting interview I've ever given about myself, so thank you.
I'm enjoying it too. When did you sort of realize, because it sounds to me that a lot of these stories revolve around you discovering what you don't like, in terms of, you don't like selling this timeshare. You didn't really want to study. Well, you did, but you didn't. And then you did, but you didn't end up getting the job that you thought it would lead to. So there's a lot of kind of like false starts and jumping around. Not that it doesn't sound like you were super unhappy for most of the time. Sure, there were moments where you didn't like the work you were doing. But when did it switch to you sort of really feeling like, okay, now I've found my place and I can see myself not only, making good money here, but also being happy in this work? Sure.
Well, I think my lowest was, and I've been generally happy and perhaps the European Commission was a drag, but I was young and it was a short period of time. But really, I was desperately unhappy when I was owning the recruitment company. And that was a shame because, on paper, everything was fantastic. We did 2.5 million in our second year in gross sales. And in principle, I should have been over the moon. I had a company car, an expense account, but I was desperately unhappy at that point. And that was really the culmination of a series of fun adventures, frankly.
Tell me about the ventures.
Well, no, the ones I've described to you, the fun adventures,
Okay.
the Malaysia, Italy, Belgium, working in bars late at night and running around Malta. And I even did a couple of ski seasons and all of these things, a series of short-term fun activities. And I think the rule was always for me, if it stops being fun over a long period of time, then I shouldn't be doing it because life's too short. And I saw that recruitment or owning the recruitment company. And I was too immature to realize there was another way of doing it. I could have hired a general manager. I could have been stronger in putting my foot down. I could have insisted on having a day off. There were many ways that I could have managed it better. But there came the moment, I think, when I realized...
Sorry, we've got a slight delay here, so my interrupting is a bit odd. Just before you sort of transition, I am kind of curious about this recruitment company. Could you just mind explaining what it did and what how you developed it and what your role was in that company?
Absolutely. So the model was very standard, very straightforward. We were an IT contract recruitment company. And what we would do is we would service large organizations in Belgium who needed contract IT workers. So anything from first level help desk through to project manager, mainly in banking, in technology, and in the engineering sector. So Siemens was a client, Bank of New York was a client, and various others. And they had two types of workers. One type was employees, and we never helped them find their employees, but we did help them find their contract workers. So back in the heyday, which was just slightly before my time, a decent project manager would be getting anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 euros a day. And they'd be typically working through an agency who would take between 20 and 25% of that. So that was our business model. We would lobby hard with the procurement managers, the purchasing managers, the IT managers, sometimes human resources, in order to find the people that they needed for the roles that they had in-house. So we'd be put on a distribution list, we'd get an email sometimes or a telephone call, depending on what our relationship with the client was like, and they'd say, right, we need a project manager for a 9-month contract, and we can afford 1,000 euros a day. So we'd then go to our database, we'd go to our job sites like JobServe and Monster and Stepstone, and we say, we're looking for a project manager at 750 euros a day. And it was a no-win, no-fee basis, so we'd interview people, we'd check their qualifications, pure recruitment job. If the client was satisfied that they were somebody who they could work with, it could be incredibly remunerative. The tricky part of that is cash flow. So although the rewards are great and it's recurring revenue and it's cumulative, you place 2 people in a job today, chances are they'll still be working in 9 months' time. You place 2 people in a job tomorrow, it builds up. You get this beautiful curve of increased income. But with that comes cash flow management. So our IT contractors, they weren't going to wait 60 days to get paid like we were. So we had to come up with hundreds of thousands of euros every month in order to pay them. So they'd submit their timesheets to us. We'd endeavor to pay them within 5 days, but our clients would pay 60 days or 60 days end of month or whatever they felt like paying. So there was a commercial finance element. So we needed to have relationships with the banks who we would sell the invoice to. It's called invoice factoring. So we'd assign the invoices to them. They would collect from our clients. They would advance us 80% of the value of the invoice as long as the client was insurable. And it became a CFO was one of our first hires because that the ability to save us, because we were paying interest on a daily basis depending on how much we needed, and we need to calculate on a daily basis how much we needed. And it was fun. But you needed to have a good relationship with the bank, which is where my business partner came in. And it's a great business model, but it's not for everybody. Unless you have access to funds, you can't run that kind of business unless your contractors are prepared to wait, which they're not, because the big companies have access to funds. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And you tell me about your role in that and why it was so miserable. Is it just because of your partner, or?
No, he was a great mentor to me in many ways. He helped recruit me to work in a previous recruitment business where I learned the ropes. And then I realized that there was a lot of money to be made and you only live once, so I should give it a shot. So I set up a recruitment company, and then I made a play to take him with me as a partner. And I also offered the opportunity to a couple of other partners in that company who turned it down, but he came to join me, and that was great because it would have been almost impossible without him. I was the chief salesperson, general manager, office manager, number one recruiter in the beginning. I was also a human resource manager. I wore all the hats, and we started to hire. We hired a CFO. Wasn't our first hire, but it was one of our first hires. We hired a few young salespeople. I loved training them, teaching them the ropes, set them on the phone. Standards were: here's the script, here's what you need to know, here's what you need to do. You need to set up meetings for me and eventually for yourself, and you need to make 20 qualified telephone calls a day. So it was pick up the phone. Who's in charge of recruitment? How can we become a supplier? And if you had 20 conversations like that every day, eventually it would lead to the money. So it was very straightforward. I think I was miserable because I wasn't at all interested in IT engineering, and my entire day frequently was spent talking about programming languages or project management methodologies day in, day out. And I was never going to feel comfortable with that, but it was still a part of my job. A big part of the stress came from managing expectations. We had a fantastic first year, 1.4 million. And then we had to do better the next year. And then I felt that we had to do better the year after that. And I felt we were doing enough. And my business partner felt that we weren't. And he was the money man. And although we were 50-50 partners, the balance of power was never equal. And I felt that I traded one boss for another boss, even though that was the business. And he was very tough. And now we're great friends. I mean, we call each other, we chat. But he got to the stage where I felt that I could no longer serve him in the capacity that he expected of me. And that was causing me a great deal of stress.
So one day you said, that's it, I'm out?
It wasn't a one-day decision. It was a long decision. I made sure there was continuity, and the company is still doing very well with neither of us involved. So I divested to him. We appointed. So I said, I suggest that this guy, who was a recent hire, would be a great candidate to run the company. He agreed, and eventually that guy did a management buyout. And so, no bridge is burnt, I don't think, in the long term, and we're still good friends. But I forgot your question. So yeah, it wasn't a one-day decision. It was a long-term decision, and I made sure that I waited until I took a distribution to fund whatever came next, and I just had a kid at that point as well. My first son had been born,
right.
So I didn't want to do anything rash, and I did research exactly what was coming next, and that was one of the reasons I enrolled in the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training. So I wanted to hit the ground running. I didn't want to wing it. I didn't want to try to create a coaching methodology or some intellectual property that resonated with the market and take the risk that it didn't resonate with the market or that it didn't work. So I enrolled in a school of coach training. I bought a license to teach something which was proven, and that really allowed me to. Yeah, I mean, the first month was profitable. There was no question that it was a good choice for me. Kind of 4 weeks in.
Okay, so tell me a little bit, because sort of the question I asked originally here was about when you found the work that you enjoyed, and it sounds like none of these roles you had necessarily were 100% horrible. Like there was parts of them you did enjoy, and then parts you didn't. So when you switched to Book Yourself Solid and began educating yourself in someone else's selling system, was that looking like, did that sort of, I guess it's kind of hard to say in hindsight, or maybe easier to say in hindsight, but did you sort of feel like, okay, this is ticking more of the boxes of how I want to make a living, support my family? Because I'm assuming you were thinking about that, having first had your child then. But also, you're like, the thing with, you went from being an entrepreneur, sort of, like, well, certainly at the starting the company, to now looking to kind of become a teacher. Is that a coach? Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I tell you what it was. I had that feeling that the minute I started my training with Michael Port, and still to this day, almost 9 years later, the feeling was, I'm the boss now. For the first time in my life, even when I was the owner of that recruitment company, I was a 50% owner and I wasn't the financier. So this time, this chapter of my life, and who knows what's around the corner, maybe something else will happen next week, but for the last decade, it's always felt the same, that everything is within my control. Whether I'm coaching or teaching or speaking or writing or traveling, whatever I'm doing, I'm doing it because I can. I get to choose my clients. I get to choose hours, and I work quite hard. My wife would say I could cut back. A lot of my clients are in the States, and I like to talk to them at a reasonable time for them. So I certainly don't do a 4-hour work week, but for the first time ever, I think I've been the boss, and that's been very powerful. I've also seen that things are possible. You can say yes to as many things as you can say no to and make them happen. And I never felt I had the complete freedom of choice in any of my previous roles. And that's been very, very powerful for me.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's the ultimate goal for most of us, is that freedom and control. So with the training you went through with Michael Port, and then even going forward beyond that, can you maybe take us through, I guess, how you learned really to craft the fine art of selling? Because I know you obviously had a lot of practical experience before becoming a teacher, speaker, coach, and so forth, leader in Michael Port's world as well. What, I'm trying to kind of grasp the awakening to these sales techniques that you learn. Was it purely through the study of them? Did you get to have case studies? How did it all come to be going forward?
Well, since I think the first introduction to the study of selling was in timeshare. So I was 22 years old when I started in timeshare. And we were encouraged to, we were given books to read. The Closers by Ben Gay III and the other books like that were recommended to us and bought for us. Every morning we had 45 minutes to 60 minutes training from managers, in-house training every single day. So we'd be in the office at 9, we'd have a 15-minute meeting, and then it would be 45 minutes of training. And this was a great discipline. And I started to get really interested in all the literature around selling. And I kept reading that. I moved into recruitment. We were sent to training seminars. I kept reading. I built my library of sales books. And I haven't read them all. There are tens of thousands, but I've read, a lot of them many times. And I was aware that there was a discipline to be learned and systems of doing things, and things like handling objections. You could systematize handling objections. You could systematize rapport building. You don't try to jump into bed with somebody as soon as you meet them. You date first. And this was, I realized that this didn't happen by accident, but people were careful and they thought about this. And books by people like Ziegler and all the classic writers were very much a big part of my world. And so I had systems in my recruitment company, very, very clear systems. And when I joined the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training, again, it was a very clear system. If you're not familiar with Michael Port's, if any of your listeners are not familiar with Michael Port's Book Yourself Solid, it's a systematic approach to building a business and selling your stuff. And it's a beautiful arrangement of concepts and ideas into a methodological, modular rhythm that makes it easy to grasp, easy to understand, and easy to apply. And I always felt with Book Yourself Solid that one of the parts that was perhaps missing is an in-depth. So Book Yourself Solid goes from deciding what you do, deciding what you offer, deciding who you serve, deciding what your personal brand identity is, to building trust and credibility, to putting a sales cycle into place, to having a keep in touch strategy, information products, perfect pricing, a module called Super Simple Selling, and then we get to marketing, with the idea being that marketing shouldn't be done until you've got a way of converting the leads that you attract. So too many people start with Instagram and don't have a way of turning their followers into customers. So the bit that was always a little bit lacking for me was how to close. And I'd received endless experience in closing, because that was my professional history up until then, prospecting and closing. So people were asking me within the Book Yourself Solid world and further apart, what actually, I keep dropping the ball when it comes to actually making the sale. We got this super simple selling thing, which teaches me how to open the sale, but actually closing it is a bit tougher. So I ended up teaching it and teaching it more until I thought, well, listen, I know this stuff inside out. It's been decades now. What are the components that I put into every single sales offer, whether that's an online launch or a sales letter or a sales conversation? And they developed into the principles of professional persuasion, which you saw when I sold the Apple in London.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's kind of like an evolution, really, to be fair. You start in your early 20s all the way up to what you're doing in your 30s and still doing today. So maybe we could switch to a little bit of how-to training for the listeners who aren't maybe new to selling. I haven't got time to do a whole presentation or anything like that, but in your experience, what is sort of the number one area where people tend to go wrong with sales, and what should they do instead?
I think the number one, if there was one piece of advice which is critical for everybody, it's the element of control. David Sandler is the author of a book called You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. And it's one of the best sales books ever written, as far as I'm concerned. He's also the founder, deceased now, but was the founder of the Sandler system, the Sandler Training Group, I think it was called, which is a franchised selling training organization. And so he says if you don't have a system for selling, I'm paraphrasing, you'll forever be at the mercy of your prospect system for buying. Which means the prospect and the seller, even though they may have similar outcomes in mind, they have different ways of getting there. The prospect will say, how much does it cost, and make a decision based on that. An effective buyer will look the prospect in the eye, an effective seller will look the prospect in the eye and say, this is the way that we do things around here. First, I'm going to show you X. Then I'm going to show you Y. Then we're going to go for, all the stages could be different for each individual. Then we're going to go for lunch. Then I'm going to make your proposal if you qualify to be a customer. Then you're going to take that proposal back to your organization, your board, and you're going to come back to me with an answer by Thursday. Is that something that you can commit to? Yes. No, it depends. What many prospects do when they go to me, I've got to get this right, I do it for a living. What many vendors and many sellers do when they go to meet a prospect, right, is their knees start knocking, their adrenaline starts rushing, and they put their prospect on a pedestal. And they say, oh, Mr. Important Prospect, thank you so very much for seeing me. I know you're very busy. I promise not to take up too much of your time. And their hands are shaking. And they say, I'm sure this is something that you may or may not be interested in today, but I just want to give you the opportunity to have a look at my prospectus. And the prospect goes, well, I've clearly got the control here. I have the authority. I have the upper hand. We're going to do things my way. Instead, we need to adopt the high-paid consultant mindset, or the doctor's mindset, or the lawyer's mindset. If you walk into a doctor's office, the doctor doesn't say, thank you so much for choosing me. I'm so very grateful for your custom. I think it would be a great opportunity if we get to know each other, and can I take you for lunch? He says, what seems to be the problem? Drop your pants, bend over.
Yes.
And we respect the authority, and we go to him. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling Mars bars or nuclear submarines, unless you map out the journey. And ideally, we don't want to be saying, drop your pants and bend over. We want to be walking the prospect through our predefined. Well, there we go. Exactly. And certainly no judgment here. Libertarian all the way. You want to be walking your prospect by the hand, consensually, along your pipeline, your predefined pipeline, from the left-hand side of the screen to the right-hand side of the screen. They're not going to go there of their own accord, so you must control that. And you control the follow-up, and you control when they give you an answer. And you, if they're going to say, let me go away and think about it, there must be parameters around how long they can think about it, when they have to get back to you. Do you both agree what the next course of action is? And do they understand? So I think many of us underestimate our own value. And when we do understand our own value, we can walk in there. Like, I train a recruitment company here in Malta. They're my only Maltese client. It's not a very big market. I'm very happy to live in Malta and not work too much. But there is a recruitment company here, and I go in and see them a couple of times a year, and I train them on business development. And one question that they are perpetually asked by their prospects is, so why should we work with you? So they attend a meeting with a prospect, and the prospect goes, so tell us, what are your credentials? Why should we work with you? The natural inclination of somebody with high levels of emotional intelligence is to please at that point. And they start to do a dance, and they dance to the prospect's tune. And they start to use adjectives and say, we will always put you first. And, we are deeply invested in our client's success, and blah, 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 blah. All of these things that, we are big, and we are strong, and we are clever, and all these things which anybody could claim and anybody could say. I much prefer to flip it back. And I say, look, if anyone asks you, why should we work with you? The only answer is, I don't know. That's what we're here to find out today. And if the only credentials that you need if you're an established firm is the names of your existing clients in corporate, if you can show them that their competitors are working with you, then that's all the credential and credibility building that you need. You say, why should we work with you? Well, I don't know. We're here to find out whether you should or not. But let me tell you, 750 of our current clients choose us for the following reasons. You lead with power instead of being the dog that will jump for the bone. And I think that makes the biggest difference. It's a combination of confidence and discipline. And I think the vast majority of my time is spent instilling discipline. Many salespeople think they can improvise their way around solutions. They can use the gift of the gab. And it's just not true. If you look at taking your prospect through the sales process, taking a prospect through the sales journey, if you look at that with the same level of discipline that you would have if you were stacking shelves or building a cabinet, it's not optional to put that can of baked beans on the shelf. It has to go from the box to the shelf. And I think asking for exclusivity or demanding a yes or a no answer or not or following up when you say you're going to follow up, none of these things are optional if you're in sales. You follow the discipline and the results will come.
You've triggered a memory. I'm actually going through Chet Holmes' The Ultimate Sales Machine book right now. You might be familiar with it.
Fantastic book.
And he's constantly reinforcing the fact that you need to have the die-hard discipline to follow through and do everything that he's recommending. And that's actually the only trick to all of this, is just to follow through and actually doing everything that you have to do.
What does he call it? Pig-headed determination?
Yes, that's the one. Pig-headed determination.
That's all.
Over and over again.
And it's absolutely true. There's two elements to selling. I think all of us, an analogy I use is the muscle, the sales muscle. We've all got it. We're all born with it. When we're kids, we scream and cry until we get what we want, and then it gets conditioned out of us by niceness, which is not a bad thing for society at large. But there's two elements to building any muscle. One of them is activity, and the other one is form. So activity means you've got to do the reps, you've got to do the push-ups, you've got to do the squats, and form prevents you from getting injured. Form has once you've got basic form in place, it only has very, very, very tiny effects on the end result if you're a top performer. But if you're not a top performer, if you're someone who wants to functionally perform, then you cannot get ripped, whether it's your biceps, your triceps, or your sales muscle, if you're not doing the reps. And many clients, private clients, come to me and they say, I haven't made a sale in 60 days. I say, okay, how many sales offers have you made in 60 days? And they say, well, none. And I say, well, I see a correlation here. Go out and have 100 sales conversations with strangers and see what happens. And depending on what they're selling, they could probably make one sale to a stranger in a shopping mall. And that means they've got a 1% conversion rate, which is great. Then we work on the form. We choose the target market. We work on the close. We work on the open. We work on the features and the benefits and all the bits and pieces, and we improve our closing rate. But without activity, it's all theory.
So true. I think it's a golden rule for everything, really, in life. Got to do. Can we just turn this, everything you're talking about here and how it applies to strictly online marketing, since a good chunk of my audience are predominantly selling entirely through the internet. So how does this philosophy apply to the internet and become practical in the internet, since there's a lot of things you can't do face-to-face, so to speak?
Absolutely. And I would say a good 70% of my clients come through an online channel. Although my delivery is often using my mouth, many of my clients come through online channels. So I think you've still got to take your clients through the same process. You've still got to take your prospects through the process. And what most of your listeners will know this as is the sales funnel. So your qualifying prospects, first of all, which is the first step in the professional persuasion sequence, by asking them to self-identify as someone who's interested in that ebook or that tripwire offer or that opt-in or that cheat sheet or that webinar. You're qualifying them and you're saying, is this you? Do you want more clients? Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to be more attractive to the opposite sex? If yes, come and find out about me. And look, I'm not a weirdo. So we're going to spend a little bit of time rapport building connection. I think a lot of people jump into, one of the problems, a lot of people online, they kind of jump into the credibility stage, which is, I made $60 million while sitting on the beach in the Bahamas, and you can do the same, which isn't bad. It kind of works. But I think the more finesse way is to build connection first. And the way that we build connection is by showing that we understand the world of the prospect. And sometimes this can be by illustrating or demonstrating what their issues, what their problems, what their desires might be. Sometimes it's by sharing photos of our kids and saying, look, I'm just like you, I'm not a weirdo. Sometimes it's by demonstrating people that we have in common, third-party endorsements, stuff like that. So we're doing all of this, hopefully, to get them, because ultimately people will buy emotionally. And two types of purchase, the logical and the emotional. Emotional tends to win. We'll make an illogical purchase emotionally, but it's rare for us to make an unemotional purchase logically, or is less common. So we've got to build that emotional rapport, and then we say, look, this is what's going to happen. Now you're in my world. I'm going to take you by the hand, and I'm going to lead you through this process, which is the control step. And very often, a lot of your guys, a lot of your listeners will have this mapped out in their sales funnels and in their sales processes. We identify the problem, we give them a solution, and then we have as much fun with the benefits as possible. So for a long time in 2013, I wrote a daily email to my list, and it was styled on the Ben Settle email a day, 500 words, fun email, segue, offer every single day, 365 days, or I think I did 362 or something like that. My crowd would get an email from me, and I just explored all the different benefits of joining my More Clients Mastermind using that email sequence, using that email exercise. And I was amazed. On day 272, I talked about how I had been teaching people who were professional charity fundraisers how to use the principles of persuasion to raise more money for charity. And I said, so if you join my More Clients Mastermind, you will also learn how to raise money for funds that matter to you, how to raise funds for organizations that matter for you. And off that one email alone, 3 people who'd been on my list who'd never corresponded with me before said, it took me 262 emails, but that was the benefit I saw of joining your More Clients Mastermind. Up until then, I didn't realize why it was for me. So I think benefits can be explored at great depth over many years and thousands of bullet points. I don't know about you, Yaro, but whenever I write a sales page, I can spend a day or two bullet pointing benefits. Like, what happens if you can get more clients? Well, your sex life will improve. Well, how? Well, let's work it out. We can go down correlation and direction and cause. Social proof is absolutely critical. Useful social proof. Anything you say about yourself is great. What other people say about you is more important. Scientific proof, logical proof, numerical proof, any kind of proof. Anything say, don't take my word for it, because that puts you in a really confident position. If you can say, don't take my word for it, here are the case studies, here's what the doctors say, here's a testimonial from somebody just like you. And then I think we shouldn't be afraid to preempt the difficult objections. So we want people on side agreeing that not having enough money isn't enough reason for not investing in this program. We want people to agree with us that the best time to lose weight is today, not tomorrow. And you and I will both agree, Mr. Prospect, that we've seen some real failures in the weight loss industry for people who say, I'll start tomorrow. Why? Because there is no tomorrow. You know that, and I know that. Therefore, let's continue. And what you've done is you've planted the seed in their mind that they're not going to be able to use that against you in the future, which will be it's tomorrow, because they've already agreed. It's Cialdini's principle of consistency. They've agreed that this is not an objection that they can use. So we must address the most difficult objections up front. Online and offline, many salespeople kind of hope that the same objections they get every single time won't come up this time, which is a fool's way of looking at things, because if they come up every single time, of course they'll come up this time. So what do? We disarm rather than try to dodge. Bonus stacking, bonus loading, always do it, even if it's just a free box of chocolates. Doesn't matter. People will make purchases because they like the look of the amenity kit or the glass of champagne or the free access to your X, Y, and Z. And then be audacious with your risk reversal. You don't have to have a money back guarantee, but I've seen in my experience, the longer the money back guarantee, the less people are likely to take it. Done a program in the past where we offered a 2-year money back guarantee and there was a 0 refund rate, possibly because people forgot that they forgot that they could get their money back. I don't know, but there's no danger in standing behind your promises, particularly in an industry where your inventory costs are 0. I think you're crazy not to offer people the opportunities like it. It's also a great filter for the right people. You should never sell the guarantee as being the reason that they should do it, or you'll get serial refunders. But if you make it quite clear that you're the one assuming the risk and they're assuming none, or you could offer a results guarantee, or you could offer a trial period, why not test all of these things? One of my clients is an incredibly successful business coach, and he's been playing recently with a pay a deposit today and pay nothing for 2 months. Business model for a mastermind program he has, very expensive mastermind, and it's just going like gangbusters. People are spending future money. He's assuming all the risk. He has to delight in the first 2 months, or they're out, and it just works phenomenally well. So I think if you can afford to be bold and offer that kind of satisfaction guarantee, then your prospects will thank you for it with their cash. Scarcity and urgency always work. If you can use them with integrity, you must. If you can't use them with integrity, there's a special place in hell for you. Cart closes tomorrow, reopen the cart. I don't like that at all. But then close and be firm, and don't be afraid to say no to business. It doesn't apply so much if you've got a sales page for a $99 offer, but if you are selling maybe consulting services or high value services online, don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, but this offer is off the table, because otherwise you'll be chasing your tail for a deal that will never come through.
One more sales question.
There are my thoughts based upon principles of professional persuasion.
There's a lot there, and that actually is leading me to this next question. So I know if you're like me and most of the listeners, and probably yourself over the years too, you keep coming across so many of these kind of ideas that you jot down, and if I just added another bonus, if I just played a bit more with split testing, different things here, working in like doing some research to find some data to back up what I'm doing, to get some more case studies, get some more testimonials, all these techniques that are proven. We know they work because everyone uses them, but there's too many of them. It's overwhelming, and you could spend your entire life doing nothing but split testing and adding and subtracting these kind of concepts to your marketing funnel. If there's a feeling of overwhelm, what would you recommend people start with? Is there like an 80-20 rule of persuasion techniques, the number one thing to do first if you're just getting started with this? Firstly, you've got to make sure that you're actually providing a solution to an issue in the marketplace, whether that's a problem that you're solving or a delight that you are endowing upon your prospect, upon your client. That must exist. If you have to educate the market on why they need your thing, I think you're on a starter for nothing. That requires far more investment in marketing and education and stuff like that. If you've got a genuine solution to a recognized problem, then if you don't, you're screwed. If you don't, you're screwed. But if you do, that's great. The other thing that I would work on more than anything is voice and the connection element. If you've got an e-commerce store that's selling bangles, that's one thing. But if you're selling any kind of services, is there a reason that Frank Kern is Frank Kern? And I think the answer is probably his magnetism. Also great marketing chops, knows exactly what he's doing, incredibly intelligent, a fantastic copywriter. But also, I buy from Frank Kern because I love the guy. Why? Because he's amenable, because he's personable, because he's got a voice. I spend more on tips. I tip the bartender more when I like them more. I have made business decisions with regards to my ongoing education, with regards to the platforms I'm using, with regards to the service provider that I'm using, because I like them. And I think if you can focus on that connection element, how can you become amenable? How can you become a voice? How can you connect with people in a stronger way? Then the marketplace will be a lot more forgiving. That's what I think. And to do that, is that just practice? Just practice writing, practice speaking, practice everything to do with your voice?
Yeah, I think it's about developing the voice as well. Who are you? What do you stand for? And importantly, what do you stand against? If, in the words of Michael Port and probably many, many others, if you try to please everybody, you'll end up pleasing nobody. If you are vanilla, you'll attract vanilla clients. If you stand for something strongly or you stand against something strongly, people will get emotionally engaged with you. If you read like an instruction manual, people won't get emotionally engaged with you. And if you were to start, Yaro, and you would never start this, but I want to give a really extreme example. If you were to start a podcast called, if somebody were to start a podcast called Online Marketing for Neo-Nazis, they would get all of Yeah, exactly right. They would get all of the neo-Nazi online marketing business. No question. People who associate, who have a strong sense of identity, or if, online marketing for Buddhists or whatever it is, people who have, whose identity is so deeply entwined with that set of ideals or that set of political beliefs, they will gravitate towards the person, even if they're a substandard provider in terms of education or information or practical application of their stuff. They're right people, they're Buddhists, they're neo-Nazis, will naturally flock to them. So because they've got a very good reason to, which is a sense of identity.
Yes, polarization is a good marketing technique.
You can't be magnetic unless you're repelling. Magnets have a north and a south.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never think of the idea of magnetism is polarization. It's the two sides. So
it is. Absolutely is. Yeah.
Okay, as we kind of move towards the end of the interview here, Matthew, I am curious, what's the day in the life of Matthew Kimberley like now, and why have you decided to kind of, I won't call this the end point, but why have you reached this current point, given all the different types of careers and things you've done in the past? Why does this right today suit you? But of course, what is it first? Well, how do you live today? Okay, so if I'm not traveling, which I am frequently, so I just got back from a 10-day trip, which saw me go to New York to speak at an event hosted by a guy called Todd Herman, who's a brilliant performance coach, created the 90-day year. He has a program, a mastermind program. He invited me to go and talk to his people in New York a week ago last Saturday. So I flew out there, minus 15 degrees, miserable. Spoke for Todd's event, meant to fly back, plane was cancelled, got to London, gave a one-day seminar to a group of about 50 or 60 small business owners, startup business owners in London. As a result of that, signed up three definitely, possibly 4 clients for my advisory board mastermind. Then met some private clients in London and then came home. And that's pretty typical. I might spend 10 days a month on the road, speaking at events, meeting with clients, things like that. When I'm here, I will be woken by my kids. I've got 2 kids, 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. They'll wake me up between 5:30 and 6 o'clock. And we'll put them on the bus at 7 in the morning. I'll then walk the dog for an hour, have a couple of coffees, go home and slowly stroll to the office. I came into the office at 10 o'clock this morning because we were talking. That's pretty much the earliest I'd get in, typically it'll be about 11. I sit down, I do a couple of hours work, tend to emails, admin, stuff like that. Spot a lunch, calls in the afternoon with clients, and then walk the dog, have a beer, go to bed. Domestic bliss. Domestic bliss is my life. I have an office outside of the home, and I enjoy that because I get to walk. It's only a 5-minute walk from home along the seafront. Tend not to work weekends at all anymore, which is great. And who knows if this is the final iteration? I'm almost 100% certain it isn't. One thing that I'm exploring, Yaro, which your guys will be, I've got to stop saying your guys, your guys and gals, your listeners will know a lot more about than me, is e-commerce this year. So I'm looking to add, although I have products, I have my school for selling, I have my single malt mastermind, I have my professional persuasion, these products exist. I'm interested in, they involve me. So what I'm looking forward to doing this year is using my marketing and copywriting chops to develop an e-commerce brand where nobody even knows I'm involved with that. I'm excited about that for a couple of reasons. One, I think it'll be a good neutral and objective test of my skills. And the second part is, if I get sick, I'm afraid that 9 months, a year from now, my family might run out of money. I don't I don't want to be directly involved in business for the rest of my life. So I've got a couple of projects on. But today, I love it. What I've done over the last few years, Yaro, is I've really tightened my red velvet rope. And this is a policy from Book Yourself Solid, which is an analogy. It's for the red velvet rope outside your nightclub. The bouncer stands on the door. They decide who can come in order to ensure the experience for everybody on the inside. Is there a right balance of guys and girls? Do they look like they have enough money to spend? Are they going to cause trouble, or are they going to be fun? These kind of questions. So in your business and in your life, frankly, you should also apply this red velvet rope policy. You decide who you let into your life. You decide who you let into your business. And I've been tightening that. And I can honestly say, although I have great days and less great days, every single one of my clients today that I have to speak to, that I get to speak to, is a rock star. And that's deliberate. There isn't any time. I've got a lot of products now. I don't know I haven't met every single one of my customers, but the clients who I get to spend time with, it's just a pleasure. And that's been through deliberate filtration of energy and capability and personality. It's a delight. Sounds like a good mix. I love the e-commerce coming into the mix too. And testing your own skills. That's cool because then you can go and take what you learn and use it as case studies to your consulting business, your speaking business. So that's cool. You're not going to be doing e-commerce to sell apples, are you?
I'm afraid that market is too competitive even for me.
Okay, because you're good at selling apples, so I just thought maybe, maybe not so many margins in that kind of field, but okay, Matthew.
Well, if you're selling them for 50 to $100, right?
Yeah, well, you if anyone can do it, you can. So, gold encrusted apples or just very well psychologically positioned apples. Matthew, for people who want to find out more about what you do, where should they go?
Go to MatthewKimberley.com, and I think I own every misspelling of that name, which redirects to MatthewKimberley.com. That's Kimberley, Ley at the end. And really, most of my best work, most of my best writing goes out by email. I don't blog very frequently, and I don't have much of a social media presence, but I do quite a lot by email. So I'd love to have any of your listeners as my pen pals.
Just one question that you triggered there. Is most of your personal business growth then, does it come primarily from speaking or primarily from email marketing or a bit of both?
Last year, 2017, was mainly JVs, so joint venture webinars, mainly last year. This year, I'm doubling down on advertising. And prior to then, it has been speaking and writing. So blogging and writing. And I think, podcasting certainly is, I will always say yes, not to cheapen our experience, Yaro, but, I just can't see the downside to having a chat with somebody for an hour about things I love that other people will get to listen to. So certainly there have been many score podcast interviews in previous years as well. So this is the first year I'm doubling down on advertising, and last year was really, really good for me on JV webinars.
That sounds, like a very common thread, people talking about JV webinars. But I think I'm kind of curious because you do so much speaking and how much that actually gets you new customers versus the speaking itself is the income stream. Is it both for you, I'm guessing?
It is both, and it is now. It wasn't always like that. Certainly started to get paid recently in the last 3 years or so. But could I drop it as a lead gen or marketing opportunity? Probably. Probably could drop it as a lead gen activity without it having an effect on my business, but I adore it, and I wouldn't want to drop it.
Mm-hmm. It's the entertainer in you still, huh? The juggler is still out.
Absolutely. The juggler, that's right.
Okay, well, Matthew, thank you for sharing the whole gamut of this story, the British Secret Service, or the juggling, the recruitment officer, the English teacher, now the sales teacher. So you've had quite a range of careers there, but it sounds like you found the sweet spot of what you're doing now. So, but thank you for telling the whole story. I find that very entertaining and interesting, as well as the sales techniques.
Thank you for having the patience to listen to me.
No problem, Matthew. Okay, well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you everyone for listening in. This is Yaro Stark from the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. We'll talk to you very soon. Hey, this is Yaro. If you enjoyed this episode of the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast and you'd like to receive an email every time we release a brand new interview, as well as receive a series of the very best EJ podcast interviews from the archives, then I recommend you go straight away to Interviews Club. That's interviewsclub.com. Enter your email address there, and then you'll be signed up to receive all the latest podcast episodes as soon as they're released. You'll get an email direct to your inbox. That's interviewsclub.com.